Hi guys, I'm Mike.
And I'm Stephen.
And this is F1 Fanatics. Welcome back to another classic race review. It's Sunday here on F1 Fanatics, which means it's race day again. You know, we may not have any live Grand Prix to watch, but luckily we have 70 years of history to look back on. And now, obviously, in the past couple, we have been in the 2010s, so quite recent history. So some may argue not classic, but we've gone back into the 80s. And what we are doing today is we are re-looking at a race that was in 1984, the Portuguese Grand Prix. It was won by the late great, well, it was won by Alain Prost. Jeez, I've almost got it wrong. I've thrown it. Oh God. Oh dear. No, second place was the late great Niki Lauda, which meant that he won his third and final Drivers' World title, and it was a fantastic drive for him, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was perfect.
Absolutely. And how we always go through on these classic race reviews now, we will run through the running order, then we will give our top 5 moments from the race before picking our off-track moment of the race, our drive of the day, and then obviously we leave it in the comments down to you guys to let us know what you thought of the race. As always, well, when we watch it on YouTube, we'll leave a link in the description. And so, yes, we'll leave a link in the description down below to this race. But without further ado, I reckon we should probably get into doing the running order.
Yeah, let's not jump into it.
No, last week.
That was a mistake.
You'll get that. But yes, here is the running order. So in first, which I wrongly tried to announce, was Niki Lauda, was Alain Prost in the McLaren, and Niki Lauda claiming his third and final world title, finishing in second, doing enough for what was needed. Completing the podium was a young Ayrton Senna in the Tolman. Michele Alboreto recovered after a spin to finish in 4th position. Elio De Angelis in the Lotus came in 5th. Nelson Piquet in 6th in the Brabham. Patrick Tambay in the Renault came 7th. Ricardo Patrese in the Alfa Romeo was 8th. René Arnoux in the Ferrari, he came 9th. And Manfred Winkelhock, that's an interesting name, came 10th in the other Brabham. Stefan Johansson in the other Tolman finished 11th in the end. Andrea De Cesare in the Ligier was 12th. Gerard Berger, a very young Gerard Berger actually I think as well, in that one came P13. Jacques Laffite came 14th in the Williams, and Mauro Baldi in the Spirit, what a name for a car, was 15. Joe Gartner in the Osella Alfa Romeo came 16th. Eddie Cheever in the other full works Alfa Romeo. And then our retirees were Piercarlo Cinzani, Nigel Mansell, who ran most of the race in 2nd position and was unfortunate to retire on that. Derek Warwick in the other Renault retired as well. Philippe Streiff in the Renault retired. Was that 3 entries for Renault? That's an interesting one. Go on that front. Keke Rosberg in the Williams also retired. Francois Hesnault in the Ligier. Thierry Boutsen in the Arrows. Jonathan Palmer in the Ram. Don't know, that's an interesting thing.
Ram.
And Marc Surer in the Arrows, as well as Philippe Alliot in the other Ram, retired as well. As always with these kind of classic races, there are a lot of entries on the F1 grid.
There are. Seeing that first lap, I think we had a wide shot and you just saw this massive cars.
Yeah.
That was a lot.
It felt like it's going to be one of the points, I think. It felt like a very narrow circuit, which made overtaking difficult, which then meant the start was just a ram of these cars, yeah, wasn't it, from going. Yeah. But anyway, we'll get into our top 5 moments now. So starting off with number 5, and that was the early fight for the lead between Keke Rosberg, Alain Prost, and Nigel Mansell. Now, it was a great fight. Alain Prost followed Keke Rosberg on the back of his Williams for a fair few laps and was eventually able to overtake at turn 1, which will be a point coming up in a minute. But yeah, it was really good defensive driving from Keke, but clearly the McLaren of Alain Prost and the Lotus of Nigel Mansell had a lot more pace than Keke, but he did well to hold them behind. But eventually, Alain and Nigel both overtook them.
Yeah, it was a solid defensive drive from Keke. Yeah, he held them off for a good few laps, but yeah, he was in the slower car. Did he start in pole?
No, I believe it was actually Nelson Piquet that started in pole.
Ah, so he had a great start, got ahead of everyone, held them up for a few laps, but fortunately succumbed to the first lap carnage, which leads us into, well, I say first lap, first corner carnage. That is our second point. There wasn't much carnage, but there are lots of overtakes. In fact, I'm pretty sure 90%, it's probably fair to say, of the overtakes happened on turn one. The cameraman was having a great day there. He was getting some great action. He was loving it. Literally, the whole lap was like a build-up to how close you could get on that pit straight and first corner. All the moves happened.
Yeah, that's where Alain Prost made his move for the lead, where he never really looked back after that. And, Niki Lauda made the majority of his moves there, other than obviously the only moves that didn't really seem to happen there were when they were lapping cars.
Yeah.
And it was pretty much blue flag. The rest of the time, it was like, turn one, here we go again. Let's go. And literally, when we say it was building up the entire lap, we mean like the front wing was on the back end of the car in front.
Yeah.
And then it would be like, turn one, swing out. No, I think actual Mansell's move on Keke Rosberg was very good there as well, because he kind of went all over the place. He was like, dart that way, dart that way, dart that way. Gets on the inside. Yeah. Go on, Nigel. But yeah,
everyone on the inside in the end, wasn't it? No one risked the outside move. But yeah.
No, I just
all that diving.
It didn't seem worth it, and I think Keke was the main one defending. Just kind of drifted out wide. It was like, well, you can have this one.
Yeah.
I'm not going to compromise my race from going there. But we move on to point 3. We've spoken about him a couple of times, but we're also going to bring in Ayrton Senna as well. Obviously, this was seeing the young Nigel Mansell and Ayrton Senna on the grid in cars that they weren't familiar with their names, shall we say. Obviously, Ayrton would go on to have great fame and success with the McLaren team, and Nigel would spend his best years probably at the Williams team, and obviously going to Ferrari in the late 80s, early 90s as well. So
they weren't known for their drives in these cars. It was their early careers. So, yeah.
No, obviously I think one of Senna's first impressive performances came in a Tolman. I can't remember the race it was, but I believe it was another classic race in the wet with Senna. But yeah, I mean, heck, he got a podium in this race. And the Tolman cars actually looked a very competitive outlet, because Johansson had Lauda behind him for most of the race, and they seemed to be like Lauda was piggybacking off the pack of Johansson's Tolman, and then eventually passed it as... Yeah, well, I mean, we'll come on to that when we get to point 1. But yeah, it was brilliant to kind of see them young, and before they were kind of big names within the sport. Obviously, I think there was excitement around the two drivers, but there wasn't like much. They weren't established names of the sports that they would come to by the end of the 80s.
Yeah, and like you said, Senna got a podium, and Mansell very unlikely not to get a podium.
Yeah.
Retirement, because he was solid in second. Very good drive from him. So on to point 2, the race winner. Normally he takes up point 1. But today, Prost, number 2. We didn't really see him at all in the race.
Other than that start.
Yeah, we had the bow at the start. But other than that, he controlled the race. We were speaking about it last week, about how Vettel controlled races. It was a bit like that. He got it out ahead. Did what he had to, got the car round in one piece. Solid. can't really fault his performance at all. He had to win the race to pressure Lauda into. It was the season decider. Prost won. Lauda had to finish second. Prost did all he could to win that title. It was a faultless performance.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with more on the Prost front. It wasn't the most exciting race in terms of overtakes, and I wouldn't say Portuguese Grand Prix here. What a classic track. It's not certainly one that lends itself to thrilling action on track, but the performances from Lauda and from Prost were exceptional in terms of just faultless performances. And although Prost let Lauda eat into his lead at the end, it felt like Prost never pushed the car beyond its means. He was the master, the professor, as he's affectionately known, at doing just enough what he needs to win. And like Steve said, a faultless race where he did everything he possibly could to win that title in 1984. But point number one spot, of course, earlier this week, it was a year on to the day where we sadly lost Niki Lauda, a great of the sport, a 3-time world champion. This is the race where he was crowned a 3-time world champion. And it was brilliant. He describes it as the best race of his life. I think you were saying, he looked up, we were looking up a quote during it, that he was saying, 77 was brilliant to win after the accident, but 84 was harder because of the driver he had to beat in Prost. So huge praise for Alain Prost himself there. But yeah, he said he really had to fight because Prost, wouldn't let it slip. In the same machinery, he had to be on it every single race. And he started in 11th. What a great position to start.
Yeah, he had lots of issues, I was reading, in qualifying, which is why he started in 11th. He had he went through 3 engines over the weekend. Maybe 2, it may have been 3.
Jeez. That's crazy. And then in the race, he still had his problems as well, because we spoke about him basically tailing off Johansson, but that wasn't necessarily out of choice, because early on in the race, he suffered a turbo issue, which then meant that the power to overtake the cars wasn't really there. And so he had to be masterful of kind of using the slipstream to really...
to keep with the pack, basically,
Yeah, really take advantage of that car in front, punching a hole in the dirty air in front of him. And you always use the slipstream trains, because at stages, it would be the Tolman of Johansson behind the car close in front, and Lauda would just be following, so he was almost getting double slipstream on that front. But it was a brilliant drive. He probably would have finished 3rd without Nigel Mansell's retirement, and therefore wouldn't have won the title. But you take retirements, especially at that time.
With all the bad luck he got early in the race, I think he was juicing good fortune.
Absolutely, and with that era of racing, retirements are expected. You've got to put yourself in that position to take advantage of any slip-ups that opponents might make in front of you. And although 30 seconds behind Mansell at the time of his retirement, he was just driving a flawless race, Lauda. And it was just, and like we said, had gained in closing to 13 seconds by the end on Alain Prost, after being about 50 seconds behind. And like I said, probably Prost just taking it easy. But on that basis, it would have been interesting to know whether he would have got close to Mansell at all. Just that. But we'll never know. And once he got to 2nd, easy. Championship in the bag. What a driver. What a guy. And what a drive from him. And when a driver says that race was my best race I ever drove, it's well worth watching. Now, obviously, the link in the description below to the full race on YouTube, it's foreign commentary, so I've not got a clue.
No.
We assume it's Portuguese. So if there's any Portuguese listeners watching, you can confirm. Or not.
Yeah,
as may be the
just
case.
Assuming this is the Portuguese Grand Prix, maybe Portuguese commentary.
Yeah, and so and obviously it's back in the 80s. The TV coverage wasn't as great, and graphics are about sporadically every 10, maybe 20 laps.
Yeah.
From there, and you're like going, okay, what's going on? Right, yeah, is that okay? And then on you go, okay, that makes sense. But suddenly, Lauda had popped from 6th to 4th, and we're like, I'm not entirely sure how that happened, but he's there.
Yeah.
He was there. But yeah, no, that is our top 5, which moves us on to the off-track moment of the week. And Stephen, off-track moment of the week.
It was right at the start, so you can, if it's the only point you're going to look at, it was their pixelated race circuit of their I'm trying to think of the word, diagram of the Portuguese Grand Prix. There's lots of squares, and then C1, C2 flashing. These are the corners. Can you not tell?
Corner! But, obviously we're now used to a very high standard of kind of graphics are there.
Yeah.
So obviously you have the kind of music in the background, whilst Crofty talks you through going through the DRS zones, the Sector 1, and then they'll play up some clips of famous incidents from those corners from the race. Nope, nothing like that there, just like little squares going.
Flashing.
And we need the flashing. That is true, you can't miss out on the flashing.
You could tell how sharp a corner was with how many squares were like diagonally next to each other.
But it's a work of art. Yeah, in fact, let's bring back the pixelated track diagrams. It's what F1 in 2020 is missing. It certainly would be a way to cut budget.
Yeah.
F1 teams talking about cutting budget in this difficult time. Maybe F1 as a whole, it's bring out the pixelated tracks. I mean, that would be interesting. But driver of the day, and I don't think there's going to be any surprise who we pick. It was Niki, in a track that looked incredibly difficult to overtake on, losing his turbo early on in the race, making overtaking even more difficult, and with his title rival and teammate Alain Prost doing everything he needed to win the championship, to come up trumps and find second. Hell of a performance.
Yeah, live up to second. He provided the entertainment. He provided the quality. What more else to say?
Yeah, it just was great, and it showed, that Niki Lauda had still, almost 10 years after his first title. Obviously, his first title came after 1975, so 9 years later, he wins his third and final title, and I think that's pretty impressive. To still be competitive, considering the quality of drivers that were on the grid throughout those times, including Niki himself.
It was crazy watching. At one point, it was the front four where Prost, Mansell, Senna and Lauda. All 4 of them on the same track.
What a great time to be watching racing. Definitely. And in fairness, what a great time to be watching, bar obviously the safety back then, but to be at Grand Prix, so I imagine it must have been a lot more active. I remember obviously us watching highlights of like Monaco's and stuff where they're literally like on the corner barriers going, like going, wouldn't happen today in terms of it, but just, absolutely brilliant on that front. But that, guys, that's it. Another classic race review, and I suppose this is dedicated, this one, to Niki Lauda. Obviously, big loss for the sport a year ago for Mercedes as a team now, but he was a true legend of the sport, and it was brilliant. First time we've ever watched this race, and it is hard to go back and watch races of Niki because he was in an era where TV coverage was only just being introduced to F1, and like we said, not the best. Not going to win any television awards for broadcasting, but back then I imagine was probably pretty
top quality,
amazing quality on it. But yeah, Niki, it was brilliant to reminisce in his brilliance and show and see that kind of third and final title win. Yeah, it's not bad to look back at, like we said, what he described as his best ever race. But that's it from us. We want to hear from you in the comments below. What did you think of the race? What did you think of Niki Lauda's performance? And while we're at it, might as go, what were your favourite Niki moments? And it's probably a nice one to kind of look back at his career in this one. It'd be interesting to hear from you. And if you're new around here or haven't done so already, what can they do, Stephen?
They can like, they can subscribe, they can ding that bell.
Ding that bell. But it's been another race day here at F1 Fanatics. It ends another episode of the Classic Race Reviews. We hope you've enjoyed it like we've enjoyed watching the race, and we highly recommend going and watching the race, although at the end we wouldn't necessarily blame you if you kind of skipped through a bit, because it just became the McLarens dominating and there wasn't really much on track action after that. But it was still a great race to watch. So for now, you F1 fans, keep racing.